Today we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about the contingencies your buyer has when they're purchasing a home, and you're acting as the buyer's agent. So there's two contingencies usually. One is the inspection contingency. So let's start with that. I've got the as-is contract here with me, and then on page 5, item 12, property inspection, right to cancel. So the first line, you put the number of days that you're going to have the inspection period. So the default is 15 days, sometimes it's 7 or 10 days. And then you're going to have the home inspection. You're going to be there with your client. The home inspector is going to send the report, and then your client oftentimes will begin to sort of negotiate different things that kind of came up with the home inspection that they're asking the seller to do, and that will either be sometimes they want some money off or they want some things fixed. So the key thing here on this inspection is that once you get to the last day of the inspection and you're still negotiating and you haven't come up with a signed addendum to the contract delineating exactly what's going to be happening with the inspection, you need to tell the listing agent that these are the exact things we're looking for, and if we don't get those things, we're canceling. The word canceling has to be in your email. We're canceling the contract. That protects your buyer's deposit if in the event you don't end up agreeing on the home inspection. They'll get their money back. So again, with any type of getting somebody's deposit back, there's always a chance that the seller will say, no, I'm not giving it back, and then it has to go to either mediation or arbitration to ultimately decide it. But if you've got an email to the listing agent saying you need to let us know if you're accepting these terms by this date, and the terms are very specific. I want $2,000 off, I want a repaired termite treatment, I want the plumbing fixed, whatever it is, and then if not, we're canceling. I can't stress enough, we're canceling the contract. And again, you'd be protected in 99 out of 100 times, if not 100 times. If it did ever get to mediation or arbitration, you're going to get your client's deposit back.
Can I ask you a question?
Yep, sure, go ahead.
So if you're still only say 5 days into the home inspection period, and so you've still got another 5 days to go, when you're at the very beginning of this negotiation, would you not be so harsh until closer to the end?
Yeah, I mean, really, it would probably come the last day. I mean, and again, that's the thing about having your spreadsheet with all your key dates, so that you don't let that last day kind of go by, and then I didn't put that email out. Now because I mean, again, if you read this, as is maintenance required, this is the last sentence. Basically, buyer accepts the physical condition of the property, any violation of government building and safety codes, restrictions, or subject, buyer shall be responsible for any repairs and improvements required by the buyer's lender. So it's pretty specific, and we're going to talk a little bit about like FHA and VA buyers, and that that appraiser from them is coming at some point, usually after the home inspection is done. So yeah, I mean, again, it really, I mean, if you did it 1 or 2 days before, in terms of sending that email to the listing agent, it's just sending it. That's I wouldn't get into sort of any type of cantankerous sort of negotiations until the very end. And again, a good listing agent should expect it to come, because if they're, when they act as buyer's agent, they're going to be sending that out to, so they, again, it's just protecting your client. So I wouldn't send it in the beginning. I'd wait to the end, be pushing, and again, that's why sometimes having that inspection period be a little bit longer is better, because, you've got to get the home inspection scheduled. The inspectors are busy. Then typically, it's going to be another day or sometimes 2 days before they send you the report. Usually your client's going to see things in the report that may not have come up or been talked about when, you were there at the inspection. So now kind of time's running out. You got to get, the request list to the seller's agent. He's got to talk with his client, and then before you know it, the contingency's starting to run out. So it's just something to be aware of and something to be on top of. We had a situation where it was a little bit vague, and I did call the Florida hotline, and they did talk about, specific language. This is what we're requesting. We need to know by this date, which is usually the end of the inspection period, and then we're canceling. That's the word. We're canceling the contract if you don't agree. Now again, so you're protected. Now, the next day comes and you're still negotiating, and maybe your buyer's position softens a little bit. You're still in that negotiation, and everything it gets agreed to, and then you complete an addendum, and then you're good to go. If there's an addendum with repairs, don't be sending the repairs, to the lender. They don't need to see that. That's not, all it's going to cause is, more expense for your client, because they're going to have to come back out and inspect that those repairs were actually completed, which you can do. And then just as I talked a little bit about, like for FHA and VA, so here it talks about in the contract that you're waiving all your rights once you go by that 10-day inspection period. You've got an addendum now that says these things are going to be completed and fixed, and then all of a sudden the FHA appraiser comes out, and he says this needs to be done, which nobody saw, or that wasn't asked for. Now, again, if you read this language, it talks about, you've waived all your rights. Then you've got this other addendum that says, there's a dollar amount of stuff that the seller agreed to fix. When I talked to the legal hotline, they said, yeah, it's confusing and it's murky. So, they did seem to indicate that this sort of prevailed. Again, hopefully, whatever the appraiser wanted to, have completed and fixed, the seller's able to fix. Maybe if it's not, a ton of cost and the seller's digging in his heels, maybe the agents can get it fixed. It's the type of thing to actually, because everybody wants the deal to, to get to the end, but it does get a little bit tricky with that piece. So any other questions on that? So again, the key language to protect is, here's the list we want, here's the day we want an answer by, which is the end of the inspection period, and if we don't hear from you or you don't agree, we're canceling the contract. That protects your client's money. Now, again, as I said, you don't necessarily have to cancel it, but if it comes to that and your buyer doesn't change their stance and the seller doesn't agree, then the deal's off, you get your money back, your client's money back. And again, you need to be explaining to your client, this is what you're doing. This is what you're telling them. You're not doing it just sort of on your own arbitrarily. You're telling them that I need to send this email to protect your deposit. So that's the inspection contingency. The other contingency, which there's a little bit of confusion potentially, is the financing contingency, and that's number 8. So basically, you have a contingency that if the buyer doesn't get their financing, they get their money back. Now, if you read here, it talks about, within X number of days, you're going to have a loan commitment. And the loan commitment, can vary in terms of like how strong a commitment it is. Sometimes it's a clean commitment, they've got the loan. Other times there might be conditions put on it that still need to be satisfied, like they need to send in their tax returns, or they need to check their employment, whatever it happens to be, and it can vary. You have to talk to your client. So let's step back for a second. So it's the last day. So the financing contingency is expiring, and there's still things that have not been completed. So again, you have to ask your client, look, if we don't cancel the contract, and you don't get those things and you don't get the loan, you're going to lose your deposit. Are you good with that? So again, just from a practical point of view, you want to make sure that the lender has enough time to sort of get the stuff done so that they can give a clean commitment in the amount of time that they need. Your client also needs to be applying for the loan pretty quickly, as fast as possible, quite honestly, so that the lender has enough time. And now with the new trend, disclosure requirements, it all takes a bit longer to actually get the loan. And then the other thing that's interesting, so say you have the closing date. What I've been doing is having the closing date and this financing commitment date be the same. Okay, so you're going to close, you sign the contract, you're going to close in 45 days. They've got 45 days to get the loan. All that's great, right? So you don't have to really worry as long as they close on time. Well, if you actually read this, and you read down here, it talks about, item 2, 7 days prior to the closing date specified in paragraph 4, which date for the purpose of this paragraph shall not be modified by paragraph 5A. So you're supposed to have, if 7 days before closing you don't have the commitment, you're supposed to be canceling the contract. So there's a little bit of a conflict between this 7-day paragraph and this 45, kind of when your commitment actually is due. Because 45 days could be, so if you use 45 days for the closing, 7 days before that is 38 days. So this says 45 days, but over here you only have 38 days. So again, I called the Florida legal line. They don't really have, they called it murky. So what it, and so basically there's a conflict in there and kind of how the thing is written, which is odd. But again, so what you want to be telling your client is that, the potential 1 week before you're supposed to close, if they don't have the loan, you may think about canceling the contract, or they may think about, okay, I feel strong enough. You're probably talking to the lender. You're in communication with the lender. He's telling you they're going to get the loan. So maybe
play it.
You got to play it. Right. You got to kind of see what they want to do. It's the job of us as real estate agents is not to decide what to do. It's to make sure your client knows what the repercussions, what the ramifications are. They understand sort of how this, no surprises. You don't want to get to the end and then they don't get the loan and now, oh, what do you mean I don't get my deposit back? They're surprised. You should have you should have
notified them, yeah.
Let them know, and then they get to decide. So it's everybody, I know it's a little confusing. Any questions on that? The other thing that's difficult is that, it's up to the lender. And unfortunately, a lot of times these lenders, they don't really adhere to the dates themselves. So you're stuck kind of trying to represent your client, and they're off trying to get the loan, but then, these dates, oftentimes they're not, they're not as privy to. I mean, have any of your deals closed late? They didn't close on time?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
Lisa, I know you have one that was supposed to close on Monday and is closing Thursday.
Yes.
So again, it's in that period when, they've now delayed that, again, usually if it all works out, it's great. It's when it doesn't work out, or, the lender says, gee, I can't get you, they're not going to get the loan, or the seller says, no, I'm not extending the closing date.
Well, I did an extension on mine that was closing late, and I extended not only the closing, but I extended the financing contingency. Now, it's probably still murky because I extended the financing contingency until Tuesday and the closing to Thursday. So there's not 7 days there. So what would happen if push came to shove? I don't know. I don't really want to find out, but...
No one wants to find out. I mean, you know.
And the issue at hand is out of my client's control. It's not his inability to get financing. It's that the house is having trouble being insured due to galvanized plumbing. So be very aware if you have a home inspection that comes up with galvanized plumbing, because I didn't know that would make it so difficult.
Galvanized plumbing.
It's a plumbing.
galvanized.
It's a plumbing that was done
galvanized,
up until
yeah.
the 60s, maybe even later, but it rots from the inside. And
It causes low flow, you know, so like the water pressure seems not so good. And there's been some difficulty potentially getting, you know, insurance.
Yeah.
Or maybe the insurance costs more. And like in Lisa's case, you know, I mean, she had to scurry around and call, you know, like a lot of insurance agents, and eventually found one that would
I
do it.
literally took my computer and my printer to this person's house and spent the entire day there getting his loan in order. I had clients from other houses coming to his house to meet with me. I'm like, come on in. It was interesting, but we got it done, and I think we found somebody to insure the house. But we have to have it. Still has to, you know, the binder still has to happen on
Generated.
Monday and be generated. So it's
that
still
galvanized plumbing costs
huge issue. Be very aware. Huge. And I had no idea.
yeah. If you cut the cross section of that pipe, sometimes you'll see a little hole there. It's like it just.
Yeah, it's deteriorating. If you Google Gap, you'll see pictures.
Yeah.
It's deteriorating from the inside, and like what ends up happening is that it's continuing to and eventually the pipe. I think the pipe gets just blocked, and they have to replace it. And then what happens in a lot of houses, people will replace like sections, but not the whole thing.
Right.
You know, type of thing. So it is something to be aware of. So. You know, the financing for your client, I mean, again, it's when you get to, they're supposed to have the loan that, you know, this all starts to, you know, come into play. You know, maybe we can, meaning me, can just do a little bit more research and, you know, chat with, you know, the legal line and see, you know, try to get a little bit more, because I do believe this is, you know, not crystal clear.
And the other thing that I believe is true is even if you get your financing letter and it's pretty clean, there's going to be some things they're going to require them to bring a driver's license maybe to closing, right? So that can't happen until closing. So there might be some little things that are, you know, pretty much within your client's control that are okay on your commitment letter. But even if you get a commitment letter, that doesn't really commit the lender to give your client the loan. Something could happen after you get that letter in between closing, and the lender could say no. So a commitment letter from a lender is, while it's pretty good and you need to have it, that really doesn't bind the lender.
Didn't you say like TD Bank, they don't even issue a commitment
Correct.
letter, right? So you're not even going to get a letter. I mean, really what it's...
You'll get a letter, they'll do a letter of denial, but they won't do a commitment letter. So you got to maybe be aware of what lender you're using, because if you're using, say, a TD Bank, what you need at that commitment letter date is a denial. Maybe.
Well, you don't need the denial
if they're not going to do it, because they just go straight to clear to close, from my understanding.
I mean, really what you want within that commitment period is the clear to close, you know, so that you know there's no chance at that point of the loan not being, you know, issued. You know, and again, it kind of talks to the 7 days, you know, even though you've put, you know, you think your financing contingency right up to the day of closing, really this, you know, potentially can override it. It all comes down to just, you know, in the end, if it isn't going to close, you've protected your client and you have a case, you know, to be made. Because again, what ends up happening is that, you know, as it relates to the deposit, both parties have to agree to kind of give it to whoever's getting it. So usually your buyer would think they should get it back. The seller may not want to give it back, and if they don't sign that release, then, you know, you have to go to arbitration or mediation to determine who actually should get it.
I've also had lenders that have issued a commitment letter that had things on it that were beyond my client's control. I didn't want to accept that as their commitment letter. Wanted to get these things cleared. Well, they wouldn't reissue another commitment letter. They only issue one commitment letter. So these are issues that you might want to ask your lender when you're working with them. What happens if it's not a clean commitment letter? Will you issue another one? And they did it a different way. They got those issues cleared with their underwriter, but they wouldn't give me another letter.
So the financing is important, and it's just, when you get to that date where the financing commitment letter is to be issued, whether it's 7 days before the closing or whatever amount of days you put in here before the closing, that you got it. They're getting the loan. I mean, the default, and being most conservative, if this day is greater than, takes you closer to the closing date as opposed to the 7 days, then use the 7 days and explain it to your client when you're actually signing this up. This is probably, between the home inspection and the financing. That's the most important part of all of this, so that they actually understand. And we as agents, we understand what we're not putting dates in here that we don't really, I don't really understand what this all means. Because if you don't understand it yourself, it's not possible, to explain it to your client. So this area actually, and I think it's fine to tell them, and as I said, I'll try to get some more information for all of us, but, there's a possible conflict. So using the most conservative, approach, 7 days before closing, they need to have that letter. And if they don't, then they either have to understand that they need to cancel the contract or be out there basically naked with no contingency anymore if they don't get the loan. Everybody good?
No.
All right, so let's move on to something, not that this isn't important, it's actually very important, but we can talk a little bit about, prospecting. We've touched upon that in the past. It's a new year, so sometimes, kind of new ideas can be put in place. So, prospecting for expired and prospecting for sale by owner, is a very integral part of somebody's strategy to do more business. The thing about listings is that, when you work with a buyer, typically, that's all you get out of it, at least within, a reasonable period of time thereafter. But when you have a listing or a couple listings, you can actually open houses, people contacting you directly. I know Jan, through, her great efforts, like how many people did you get out of the open houses that you did? Three. So she got 3 buyers out of, out of open house, activity. So, that's all, very, very positive, helped her kind of, jumpstart her biz. So, getting those, listings, and again, how many listings, can you possibly, if you think of a month is, 4 weeks, 4.33 weeks. And if you're working 40 hours, that's around 170 hours of time a month. So if you're a new agent and you're not really doing too much else, or you're working this full time, you've got really 170 hours to prospect. And, I guarantee you, between for sale by owner and expired listings, if you put that type of effort into it, you wouldn't even need to do that much. You can go pretty quickly. You can call 10 people an hour. And then again, when you're engaging them, you don't have to get their listing like the next day or even in a week. You're trying to build that relationship. If they seem to say, nah, I'm not ready, then call them back in 2 or 3 weeks, and they'll appreciate that. That'll tell them that you've got good follow-up, and they'll like that, because if you're following up with them, with potential buyers for their home, you'll follow up with them. And then on the for sale by owner, eventually, a lot of times, there are for sale by owners that just will never give their listing to an agent. They just it's like just not what they do. So those people are a complete waste of time. But the ones that are sort of trying it out may learn that it's a lot more work than they thought, maybe getting tired of it. Those are the ones that are primed to sort of give it to, a real estate agent. And again, they may not be ready today, but maybe in a couple more weeks you check back and you're able to get them. The thing about the expired listings, why they're better or potentially better, is that that person already, and you can see through the MLS when you look it up, they probably were paying the 6%. So they're accustomed to that. That to them is normal. And again, you have to kind of, as an agent, you have to kind of develop your own strategy, how you're going to do it. What I like to do is I like to focus on the photos. I find a lot of times listings that don't sell have bad photography. That's something to point out. That's something that you can fix. Sometimes it's just timing. Sometimes the agent didn't really do any open houses, and there's a lot of reasons why properties don't sell. But the good news about expired is they've already engaged an agent, so it's normal for them to do that. The for sale by owner is a little bit different animal, and sometimes maybe our philosophy here is you can discount your commission if you think it'll help you get the listing. So the reason why they're doing it on their own always is the money. It's really the only reason. So maybe instead of trying to get 6% out of them, if the listing price is high enough, maybe you say it's a $400,000 listing, maybe you're willing to do it for 1.5% and then offer 2.5% to the buyer's agent. So for 4%, if you sold it, you'd get $6,000 out of it, and then you're meeting $400,000 buyers. Which if you pick up one out of that listing and sell them, then you make $12,000. So that's really, you have the multiplier effect when you have listings. So that's why they're good. As a company, we do have the RedX program, which puts a nice dashboard together for all the expired listings, and they have a pretty comprehensive list of for sale by owners. Any new listings, anything that's new that expired comes into play. I think it was yesterday, and this was throughout the entire MLS. There were like 2,300 listings that expired on December 31st. Probably the highest of the year, but they tend to expire at the end of the month. That's kind of a, when someone signs up a listing, not always, but you get more. Again, having your strategy, every agent's calling these people right away, so you might say, look, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wait, a month or 3 weeks. Let that activity die down. They're probably tired of showing, and then try to get it. There was a listing I drive by. I didn't call the people, but, it was for sale probably back in the spring. Then it went off the market, and then I just saw a new for sale sign come up. So probably, they cold called that person and ended up getting that person's listing. So, but integrating your listings and then doing the open houses, it's a great strategy to build your business. Any questions on expired listings, FSBOs? The other thing too is you can look up on YouTube. There's a lot of videos that will help you in terms of what other agents do to get those listings. Some of their strategies, how they go about it. Again, just to help learn. And then if anybody's looking, for some idea or some scripts, we can certainly do some coaching and work with you to, so you feel more confident calling. All right, so I think we've covered all the topics today. Certainly available for, any calls, questions after. And thanks for tuning in and coming to the training.